and I welcome questions from my colleagues.
As we're getting close to the time, what we'll do is we'll break for question period, and then the honourable member will have 5 minutes worth of questions coming to him when we return. Statements by members. Déclaration des députés. L'honorable député the honourable member for Sturgeon River Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister's long list of failures keeps growing, and Canadians are paying for it. After vowing just 3 tiny deficits and his first balanced budget this year, this Prime Minister has delivered twice the debt and his 4th straight budget deficit, another costly Liberal failure. Now this Prime Minister is peddling an expensive carbon tax that will add 11 cents to a litre of fuel, hundreds to home heating, and hundreds for grocery bills. And that's just the beginning. Special interest groups are complaining that the carbon tax is too low, and they're urging the Prime Minister to raise it. And if given another chance, this Prime Minister will. Now, maybe the Prime Minister, who's never had to worry about money, doesn't care about another $100 a month for groceries or home heating, but struggling Canadians do care, and they shouldn't be paying for Liberal failures. In October, Canadians will have the choice to choose a Conservative government that will get them ahead. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
L'honorable député d'Argenteuil.
The Honourable Member for Argenteuil, La Petite Nation. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tuesday morning, a great sport volunteer, Ms. Lise Waters, passed on. The Outaouais has lost a great woman who was very involved in her community. Mrs. Waters had been a volunteer over the past 60 years, namely as president of Loisirs Sport Outaouais from 1988 to 2017. She had participated in the adventure of the Quebec Games in Gatineau from 1981 and in 2010. She worked hard to encourage the community to build the sports centre. And this is just part of her involvement. Her contribution has been monumental, and she's been an inspiration to all. She's surprised by her family and the community. She was and will always remain an example of kindness, involvement, and dedication.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On Saturday, February 23rd, in communities across the country, Canadians came together, raised funds, and walked on the coldest night of the year. In St. Catharines, the hundreds of neighbours, friends, and community members filled our downtown streets with hope, warmth, and compassion, and did so while raising $107,000 for Start Me Up Niagara. In 1999, Susan and Tony Venditti founded Start Me Up Niagara to help those most vulnerable in our community. It's open 365 days a year and coordinates our Out of the Cold Winter Shelter program with help of several churches across the city of St. Catharines. Start Me Up Niagara offers a variety of opportunities that improve health, increase the level of community integration, support housing, employment opportunities, including the Work Action Centre that opened in 2017. Start Me Up Niagara is an essential organization in St. Catharines and one that ensures all residents in our community have a place to go, a place to be somebody, and a place to do something. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Mr. Speaker, this year we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of a cultural organization very well known at home, the Théâtre de la Lubrique. It was founded in '69 and has an incredible journey. Over 1,300 representations and performances with over 400 artists participating. In the Saguenay, this group has contributed to developing the artistic community. Its mission to promote homegrown talent has entertained thousands of people. It is acknowledged by the community and is behind the Saguenay Marionette performance as well. I'd like to underscore the participation by everyone, the board, the volunteers, and hope that it will continue its activities for another 40 years. The Honourable Member for Châteauguay-Lacour. Mr. Speaker, as Black History Month draws to a close, I want to pay tribute to Ernest Tucker, the first black journalist hired by Radio-Canada. Following a brilliant career as a journalist, professor, and author, he passed away in January in Châteauguay. His journey, however, was often fraught with stumbling blocks.
He took jobs in Bermuda and the Toronto Telegram before joining CBC Radio in Toronto. It was then, alone in the newsroom at lunchtime on November 23, 1963, that he broke the tragic story of John F. Kennedy's assassination. For this, he was first reprimanded, then promoted, as the CBC was praised for his quick reporting. Eventually, he moved to Chateauguay and taught at John Abbott College in Montreal. Then he mentored black students while publishing Lost Boundaries, a novel about police harassment of black Montrealers. His courage and inspiring advocacy is appreciated by all of us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cariboo, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, tonight our Prince George Spruce Kings start the BCHL playoffs against the Coquitlam Express at the Rolling Mix Castle. To our players, I am a king. I am only one, but I am one of many. There are 4 core values of being a king: commitment, strength, dedication, and courage. To get to today, these 4 values have to be embedded in your fiber. And this is what we play for. This moment right here. Great moments come from great opportunities. And this opportunity is yours to leave a legacy. Tonight you start your chapter in Spruce Kings history. You have earned this opportunity. Don't let anyone take this from you. Skate faster, play harder, be relentless. Play for one another and trust one another. Don't fear failure, but never, ever accept it. This is your moment. I ask you, are you ready? Go, Kings, go!
The Honourable Member for Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, ¿cómo está? Over 100 Filipino-Canadian youth gathered in Ottawa this past weekend for their first National Leadership Conference. Hosted by the Filipino Students Association of the University of Ottawa, they launched this phenomenal event. To affirm their beliefs that our democratic principles are vital to our common future and to underscore their vision that political participation is not limited to running for political office, but extends to knowing how people's concerns are heard and how positive change happens. Their panel discussions and workshops heard from the community's trailblazers in politics and civil service, and from academic scholars and leaders in the media and business. They heard from their keynote speaker, the Honourable Dr. Ray Pactican, who's from Winnipeg, who served in this House with great distinction on the theme of politics, a truly noble calling. Canada's multiculturalism policy is proud to support this type of civic engagement that fosters citizenship values, nurtures the nobility of politics, and enriches our collective heritage. Salamat.
The Honourable Member for King Vaughan.
We recognize and celebrate the rich history of Black Canadians, and in my riding of King Vaughan, we have much to celebrate. And I want to express my gratitude to VACA and TACA for supporting and strengthening our communities and showcasing our Black leaders. This past weekend, we had our Black History Month celebration at Vaughan City Hall, and again, I'm inspired by the artists and speeches. The women showcased at the event were exceptional. This leads me to another important day, March the 8th, International Women's Day, to recognize the important contributions women have made and are making to our country and around the world. Let me combine the two by highlighting an artist featured at our Black History Month celebration, Nadine Williams, who is here today. She's a poet, an author, and an educator. At the event, she read one of her powerful poems, Rooted, which ends with, "We are belong, we are strong, we are rooted, we are free to grow, we are home." This is a vision all Canadians can share. Thank you.
The
Honourable Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, when I go door to door, sincerely I can tell you that I don't meet very many people who are satisfied with the Liberal government, and even fewer more, think that they're in a better financial situation than prior to the election of the Liberals. Public wisdom is always right, and here are some examples of policies that have led people to this verdict. In the past 3 years, people's taxes have gone up. We've seen 3 years of underfunding in the Canadian Forces, 3 years of deficits and mismanagement of our public finances, 3 years of ethical breaches, and that's the least we can say, 3 years of infrastructure programs not delivering the goods, and finally, 3 years of failure after failure in natural resources, forestry, and a host of broken promises. Mr. Speaker, Canadians and people from Beauport-Limoilou simply can't afford another 4 years of this government, this Liberal government. In October 19, you can count on our Conservative team and our great leader to change the direction of this country and restore public confidence in their future.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby North, Seymour.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to share my gratitude for the neonatal intensive care unit nurses and doctors at Royal Columbian Hospital. My wife, Ravi, and I welcomed our daughter, Nova, into the world on December 4th, 2018. At birth, she was diagnosed with meconium aspiration syndrome, which meant she had to spend 3 weeks in the NICU. Having our newborn daughter spend her first week struggling to survive was heartbreaking, but it made me realize just how intensive care really is. It's 24 hours a day, minute by minute. Thanks to their tireless care and positivity, Nova was able to come home just in time for Christmas. She is now happy, healthy, and ready to take on the world. We are endlessly grateful for the angels at Royal Columbian Hospital, Dr. Moodley, Dr. Kesavan, Dr. Chaslak, Dr. Stavel, Dr. Glass, and the dozens of nurses and staff who played a part in Nova's recovery, especially Danielle, Hannah, and Vicky. Colleagues, if you know someone who works at your local NICU, give them a hug. They're the best people in the world.
The Honourable Member for London West.
Mr. Speaker, every 2 years, young athletes from coast to coast to coast come together in the spirit of sport to compete in the Canada Winter Games. This year, the Games are being hosted in Red Deer, Alberta, and 3,600 athletes and coaches are competing in 20 different sports. I'm pleased to be heading to Red Deer tonight to attend the Games and the closing ceremonies tomorrow on behalf of the Government of Canada. When our young athletes attend the Canada Games, it is about more than just competing. It is an opportunity for youth to see our country, make friendships that will last a lifetime, and hopefully win a medal or two. With the Games concluding tomorrow, I hope all members will join me in saying congratulations to all of our athletes. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Prince Albert.
The Prime Minister's carbon tax begins to take effect this year in Saskatchewan, meaning that those already struggling to get ahead will soon have to pay another tax. Farmers, truckers, loggers, energy producers, miners, and other small businesses are upset that the Prime Minister has brought on another tax that their international competitors do not have. And while he claims that farmers will be exempt, farm representatives told me this week they cannot afford a carbon tax on crop inputs. Internal government documents confirm that Prime Minister would have to raise the carbon tax to $300 a tonne in order to meet Canada's commitments. Wow. At that rate, the average family would pay $1,000 more to heat their home. The price of gasoline would drop by 60 cents a litre. Canadians can't afford this, Mr. Speaker. It'll make groceries, gasoline, home heating, and everything else we have to buy more expensive. Saskatchewan rejects this tax grab, and they will act on their rejection at the ballot box. Their voice will be united and strong against this carbon tax.
Hear, hear. Hear, hear. The Honourable Member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Mr. Speaker, today is World Compliment Day, a day to create more positivity in the world. And Mr. Speaker, I would like to compliment you on the important work that you do to keep decorum in this House.
Excellent.
I would like to compliment the Parliamentary Protective Services for their hard work to keep everyone on Parliament Hill safe. To the Pages, they keep their cool in a demanding environment and ensure that parliamentarians have what we need for our work in the House. To all MPs in this House for the hard work they do to represent the interests of all Canadians. And to my staff who have an incredible desire to serve our constituents and who bring such enormous empathy to individuals who come to us often as a last resort when they are frustrated, desperate, and in need. My staff go the extra mile each and every single day, and I so admire them for it. And most of all, to my wife, Irene. I admire her great patience she has to put up with me in this very challenging and time-consuming job. Mr. Speaker, with my compliments.
Hey, Honourable Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The World Heritage Committee, after an investigation requested by the Mikisew Cree, found this government failing to address significant threats to Wood Buffalo National Park, a World Heritage Site. In response, this government allocates a pathetic $27.5 million over 5 years, a sum their own officials deem inadequate. Put in perspective, this government paid 200% more just to pave a road in the park. For decades, federal governments have failed to provide leadership in preventing or addressing mounting damage caused by dams or oil sands projects to the Peace Athabasca Delta, the life source of this treasured heritage site. The iconic woodland caribou, bison, and whooping cranes are at risk. So this government announces, wait for this, a fund so communities can bring people together to protect species at risk. How many more court cases will it take to get this government to comply with the law? Do the Liberals really want this World Heritage Site delisted under their watch? So much for honoring the treaties, so much for commitment to preserving natural heritage.
Well, member for Calgary, Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, our Conservative government reduced taxes, balanced the budget, and increased trade, saving the average Canadian family thousands of dollars per year. In comparison, under this Liberal Prime Minister, 92% of Canadian families are facing higher taxes, and the average income tax increase for middle-income families is $840. And that, Mr. Speaker, is only the beginning. The Liberals squandered the surplus we left them, and the Prime Minister's promise to run small deficits and balance the budget by this year were broken almost as soon as he made them. In fact, last year's deficit is more than triple what the Prime Minister said it would be. And now they appear set to table their fourth straight deficit budget. Meanwhile, Alberta continues to lose jobs, and those who are working can't afford to keep paying for the Liberals' mistakes. Mr. Speaker, Canada's Conservatives are fighting for better.
The honourable member for Scarborough Centre.
Mr. Speaker, March 8th is International Women's Day. For Canada, it is an opportunity to celebrate the contributions of women and girls and to reaffirm our commitment to advancing gender equality. This year's theme, Innovate for Change, celebrates the achievements of women and girls in science, technology, engineering, and math, as well as business and the skilled trades. It's also a call to action to remove the barriers preventing women from thriving in these fields, from unequal pay and fewer promotions to harassment and discrimination. By removing barriers, we pave the way for more women and girls to find their passions, achieve their goals, and follow their dreams. I look forward to welcoming the Minister of Science and Sport to Scarborough Centre next week to share her experience breaking through barriers at our International Women's Day event. This year, let's celebrate the women and girls who innovate for change, role models across Canada, inspiring the next generation of innovators, change makers, and visionaries. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oral questions. Question orale, the Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Morning's cabinet shuffle will not make the Prime Minister's problems go away. What the former Attorney General said at the Justice Committee was shocking, showing political interference at the highest level of government, including the Prime Minister himself. And while next week Gerald Butts and Michael Wernick will testify, they can't take the fall for his actions. The Prime Minister needs to be held responsible. Rather than running scared, will the Prime Minister show even a fraction of the courage of his former Attorney General and testify under oath at the Justice Committee?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, it was actually the Prime Minister who also agreed that it is important for Canadians to be able to hear from witnesses. Members of the Justice Committee have worked together to have witnesses appear. It was not that long ago that the Conservatives said that the Justice Committee won't meet. They're meeting, Mr. Speaker. It was the Conservatives that said that the former Attorney General won't have the chance to appear. She appeared and she was able to share what she needed to share. Within her comments that she shared, she once again confirmed that at every time the Prime Minister did tell the former Attorney General that it was her decision to take. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's not true. The former Attorney General was not allowed to fully share her story. And what she did share, this Prime Minister says he doesn't believe, because this so-called feminist Prime Minister doesn't like it when women tell the truth about him. So the Prime Minister is trying to discredit her, from not accepting her testimony at face value, to blaming her, to calling her difficult to work with. He is running a despicable smear campaign against the former Attorney General and still not allowing her to tell her full story, nor is he coming forward to tell the truth. So will he stop attacking her and admit that she spoke the truth and own up to what he's done?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
There's a clear difference between the government under the leadership of this Prime Minister, because we We support the work of committees. We have confidence in the work of committees. We have confidence in our independence of the judicial system. We have confidence in offices of Parliament. The contrast is the Conservatives, the party of Stephen Harper, with a new leader now, but still the party of Stephen Harper, that likes to divide, that likes to mischaracterize, rather than listen to witness testimony and actually bring credibility to this place so that Canadians can have institution. They are misleading and misrepresenting. The former Attorney General is more than capable of representing herself, and that's why she shared what she needed to share, and the Prime Minister assured that she had the avenue and the privilege and whatever.
Opposition House Leader.
All right, Mr. Speaker. Well, how about this? Yesterday, 5 former attorneys general wrote to the RCMP asking them to investigate the Prime Minister for obstruction of justice under Section 1392 of the Criminal Code. In their words, ordinary Canadians who do not benefit from political connections have been charged under these sections with much less evidence. Try as he might, the Prime Minister can't just sweep this under the carpet and hope that it goes away. He needs to be honest with Canadians. Will he start by testifying under oath at the Justice Committee that this House Leader says she respects so much?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
With respect to the RCMP, the opposition House Leader should know that the force is entirely independent. They make their own decisions and judgments about how and when and where to commence investigations, and they never consult with the Minister of Public Safety, neither should they.
No, member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General told us she got a call from the Prime Minister on January 7th saying she was going to be shuffled, and she was convinced the reason was SNC. Also, the clerk told the Deputy Minister that one of the first items to be discussed with the new minister would be SNC-Lavalin. Later, the new Justice Minister said he had discussed the matter with people from the Prime Minister's office. Can he at least tell us who these mystery people in PMO were? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Upon his appointment, the Minister was briefed on numerous files that relate to his portfolio. This is a standard practice for all new ministers or ministers who change their portfolio.
The
Honourable Member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, we know that one of the first discussions with the Prime Minister's office was about a special deal for SNC-Lavalin in order to avoid criminal prosecution. Who did he speak to? Butts? Telford? Bouchard? Someone else? Why aren't they answering the question? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice. Mr. Speaker.
The reverse scenario would be if a minister, upon taking a new appointment or changing portfolios, was not to be briefed. That would impede the minister in the execution of their functions and impede them in serving the public interest. As I've indicated, the minister received briefings on files that relate to his portfolio, as is the standard practice.
The Honourable Member for Elmwood Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week we heard explosive testimony from the former Attorney General. We heard that the Prime Minister led a concerted pressure campaign to protect corporate and liberal interests with inappropriate political interference. These allegations are so serious that yesterday 5 former Attorneys General wrote to the RCMP Commissioner requesting a criminal investigation. The Liberals continue to pretend that a Justice Committee investigation with a limited mandate and controlled by a Liberal majority can get to the bottom of this, but they're the only ones who think so, Mr. Speaker. So when are they going to do the right thing and launch a full public inquiry so Canadians can get the whole story?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, once again, I would make the point that the RCMP in this country are completely independent. They make their own decisions in a professional way about where and when to investigate anything. As a matter of fact, the former Attorney General for the Conservative Party, Mr. McKay, this morning indicated it is fine for citizens or the public to write to the Commissioner of the RCMP to ask about an investigation or suggest one, but they dare not direct that. That is beyond the jurisdiction. The RCMP will make their own decision.
Member for Elmwood Transcona.
While the red herrings continue continue, Mr. Speaker. No one has said that it's not the prerogative of the RCMP whether or not to decide to launch that investigation, but somebody who's been in politics that long should know it's very significant to have 5 former attorneys general suggest that a criminal investigation might be warranted. So can we please stop with the red herrings? The fact of the matter is that we've heard that there was a concerted political pressure campaign in the PMO. We want to get to the bottom of that. We believe a full public inquiry is the way to get to the bottom of that. So when are they going to launch one?
Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Justice Committee, with members from both sides, are actually working together to have witnesses appear. Witnesses are appearing and answering those questions. What's fascinating is that member who, talks about how the length of member service in this place has also been here. And it's fascinating that they choose when they like to hear certain things and they choose when they don't. Other attorney generals have also commented on what's been taking place, and they've also been saying that it's pretty impressive that the Prime Minister worked with the Attorney General to waive client's solicitor privilege and waive cabinet confidence so that the former Attorney General could appear at committee and share her story.
The Honourable Member for Jonquière. Get serious. The Prime Minister and his office didn't pressure the former Attorney General to protect jobs. She was very clear in her testimony. They put pressure on her to get re-elected. If they wanted to protect jobs, they would have protected Sears workers, Avios, Davy, and Rona workers. Meanwhile, steel and aluminum workers in Jonquière are at risk of losing their jobs because the government's not doing the work to eliminate the unfair tariffs. When's this government going to admit they don't work for workers, but the people who fill their coffers? The Honourable Minister, I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. On this side of the House, we will always stand up for workers and defend the interests of workers, and we will respect all the rules. But the question before us today is, none of the Conservatives are talking about defending workers in Canada. That's what we need to focus on today. Why are the Conservatives not standing up to defend Canadian workers when it's time to do that? The Honourable Member for Jonquière. They're not the ones who asked the question, Mr. Speaker. The former AG was clear. The Prime Minister wanted to help people, executives, who help his party. Here on our side, we stand up always for workers. We're defending workers who still aren't getting paid properly through Phoenix. People all across the country were shocked to hear the former AG talking about repeated and inappropriate pressure brought to bear by the Prime Minister and his office. People are looking for the truth. Will the government do what needs doing and finally agree to an independent inquiry so that people can finally find out the truth?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
That's a very important subject raised by the member this morning in the House. What I can tell you is that the amendments to the Criminal Code of Canada, the purpose of those amendments is to eliminate consequences for innocent people like clients, workers, or others who have links to companies that might be affected by a criminal prosecution. Everything we're doing is to try to protect workers and to hold accountable the executives of whatever company it might be.
Order. Order. I just want to remind the honourable members that the question's asked, and then we want to hear the answer, and we want to hear the question as well. So I'll just put that there. And the honourable member for Carleton.
Last week at Finance Committee, I asked why it was the Finance Minister met with SNC-Lavalin after the prosecutor had decided not to waive the trial into SNC's charges. The chair of the Finance Committee slammed his gavel down, said the questions were completely out of order, and suspended the meeting altogether. We now know from the former Attorney General that the Finance Minister inappropriately pressured her in that matter. Why won't the Finance Minister testify as to his conduct in this matter before the Finance Committee?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
The member is intentionally mixing different things up, and you know what? He can do as he pleases. That's the approach of the Conservatives. We on this side, we will respect the work of committees, and we know that the Director of Public Prosecution Service confirmed that prosecutors in every case, quote, exercise their discretion independently and free from any political or partisan consideration, unquote. Mr. Speaker, if we, on this side, we will look at the facts. We are looking at what is being shared at committee. We know that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is also looking at this matter. Mr. Speaker, we have confidence in our committees and the independence.
Member for Carleton.
Well, the Finance Committee chair claimed that these deferred prosecution agreements had nothing to do with finance and therefore could not be discussed in the Finance Committee. Only problem is they were in the budget and they were approved by the Finance Committee. Yet, the Liberal chair is blocking questions to the Finance Minister about what the Attorney General said was inappropriate interference by that same minister. So, will the Minister of Finance come out of hiding, appear before the Finance Committee, and answer as to why he was interfering with the former Attorney General's work?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, that member, which is a member of the Finance Committee, actually after having this experience came into this House and addressed yourself, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you ruled on this matter and you said it's a matter that the members of the committee need to address and take care of. And yet, rather than work with his colleagues and try to work to find a way forward, he does what Conservatives do. They do the politics of division. They tattle when it's convenient for them rather than trying to find solutions. We on this side, Mr. Speaker, we work with Canadians and we will find solutions. Canadians will have a clear choice to make. They can choose a government that's going to invest and is demonstrating that our results and our program is working, or government Conservatives with no...
The Honourable Member for Richmond, Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, on Wednesday we heard explosive testimony from the former Attorney General and Justice Minister. At that appearance, she said, various officials also pressured me to take partisan political considerations into account, which is clearly inappropriate. Mr. Speaker, that's unacceptable behavior. Wholly unacceptable. Will the Prime Minister do the right thing and resign from this House?
House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, since the outset, the Prime Minister confirmed that he and his staff had behaved appropriately, and we know that members on the Justice Committee are doing their job, and on this side of the House, we trust them to be able to do that job. Canadians will have a choice between our plan to help communities to grow the economy and to help build a stronger middle class. But on the other side, the Stephen Harper Conservatives would only divide Canadians. They have no plan for the economy or for jobs. They say one thing in English and another in French. They need to get their act together and come up with a plan, but we know they don't have one. The Honourable Member for Richmond, Arthabaska. Mr. Speaker, it's incredible what we're hearing right now here in the House. The former Attorney General was crystal clear in what she said on Wednesday. She said she was the victim of repeated pressure from PMO staff, from people at PCO, from the Finance Minister and his entourage, and the Prime Minister himself. Ongoing pressure for 4 months by 11 people. Unacceptable. What's the Prime Minister waiting for? Why doesn't he step down? The Honourable Government House Leader. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The former Attorney General said that the Prime Minister told her that the decision was hers alone to make. The former Attorney General said that it was appropriate to talk about jobs, and she ultimately decided not to go forward. The law was followed at each and every step. We have the responsibility of defending Canadians, including workers, and that's precisely what we've done and will continue to do. You can see that the Conservatives have no plan and will not stand up for workers, but we will. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear the Prime Minister fired the former Attorney General when she refused to break the rules or bend the law for him. And the first thing he planned to discuss with his new Attorney General was SNC-Lavalin. No one knows what's happened since, and the former Attorney General can't say anything else because of the Prime Minister's legal gag order. He's using privilege and committees to shield his own wrongdoings. She said, quote, some of the questions would be answered if that information was made available. So yes or no, will the Prime Minister remove his restrictions?
The Honourable Government House Leader. Or the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, as we have said in this chamber, it was extremely important, not just for parliamentarians, but for all Canadians to hear different perspectives on this matter, specifically the perspective of the former Attorney General. That is why this government and this Prime Minister took the extremely historic step of waiving cabinet confidences and solicitor-client privilege, a privilege which all lawyers in this chamber know to be a sacrosanct privilege. What we understand is that the committee is doing its work to ensure that those perspectives are heard. We have confidence in the perspective of that committee, as well as the ability of the ethics investigator to conduct a nonpartisan investigation.
Member for Lakeland.
They're actually using all of their tools to hide the truth. And the former Attorney General has gone to great lengths not to jeopardize active prosecutions and to uphold their independence. But the Prime Minister and senior Liberals, including the Finance Minister and his office, ganged up to threaten and pressure her to interfere. The only thing the Prime Minister is really worried about is his job and his power. If he has nothing to hide, then he has nothing to fear. So yes or no, will he let her tell all of the facts?
The Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, the waiver of privilege in this context was wide and historic. It was wide insofar as it relieved the former Attorney General from her cabinet confidence responsibilities as well as her solicitor-client responsibilities. What was not waived, and this is important for the other side and for all Canadians to understand, is the aspect of privilege that relates to two ongoing matters that are before the courts. When matters are before the courts, they are not to be influenced by members of Parliament, members of government, or cabinet, because they are under judicial consideration. That is an important precept for the very rule of law that all members of this House seek to uphold and ensure.
The Honourable Member for Hochelaga. Mr. Speaker, Waskahegan Corporation is a not-for-profit that rents low-rent units to the urban Indigenous population. But many residents turn out to be non-Indigenous, and yet many members of First Nations wait for years in vain to get an apartment. In addition to discrimination, Indigenous people often have a harder time finding housing. Will the minister ensure that federal funding to off-reserve housing reaches its intended target? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you very much. The specific case to which the member refers to is one that raises some important questions, and I'd be happy to discuss the issue with her afterwards to understand exactly how federal funding and the client list or the tenant list is constructed in that situation to ensure that dollars assigned to urban Indigenous housing programs serve people from that particular community. In general, though, what I will say is that the housing programs that have been put in place, and I think this is an important distinction from the previous government, is that the co-investment fund, as an example, but also the homeless partnership strategy, now called Reaching Home, have all been broadened to include Indigenous communities. They are no longer told not to apply. We include them in the mainstream program.
The Honourable Member for Desnete, Mississippi Churchill River.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have presented bills on Indigenous languages and Indigenous child welfare, but have not committed any base funding. Children and languages are too important for their promises to be empty. Language keepers and child welfare advocates both say these bills don't meet the needs of Indigenous people. First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people will not accept promises that come without funding. Why are the Liberals making empty promises to Indigenous people?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Canadian Heritage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Language is at the core of who we are, but Indigenous languages across the country are endangered and are disappearing. This is a direct consequence of our government's past actions meant to destroy Indigenous languages. It is time to take action, and that's why our government introduced Bill C-91 with support from all parties, and we hope that this will become legislation before the end of June. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, in his much vaunted public mandate letters to all his ministers, the Prime Minister told each minister to be honest, open, and sincere, and to serve only the public interest. The testimony from the Attorney General shows the Prime Minister and his team have not been open. They've not been completely honest, and in fact, they've tried to pervert the course of justice to favor private corporate interests. Since the Prime Minister fell short of the conduct he demanded of his ministers, will he resign his role as the head of government?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
An experienced member knows that we should respect committees. They had their playbook that would disrupt and destroy committees. We on this side, we increased resources to committees so that they could actually do their important work. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are watching, and they noticed that the Prime Minister was able to waive a solicitor-client privilege and cabinet confidence so that the former Attorney General could speak. We know that committee members ask tough questions, but what they also know is that this week we saw the stats and that 300,000 children have been lifted out of poverty because of the Canada Child Benefit. They know that the Conservatives voted against it, Mr. Speaker. They know that we have a plan, that plan is working, and they know the Conservatives have no plan.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, on January 28th, the Government of Quebec held its caucus in Gatineau. And we can only assume that SNC-Lavalin was on the agenda for this federal-provincial ministers' meeting. Did anyone from PMO or any minister give assurances to the Government of Quebec that SNC-Lavalin would get their special deal and avoid criminal prosecution? Yes or no? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, we have a process. We have committees, the Justice Committee, with members from both sides of the House sitting on it. Members worked together and they called witnesses. The witnesses appear and they answer questions. Members from both sides ask those questions. They call the witnesses. But you can see that the Conservatives never had any respect for committees, and today nothing's changed there. But we on this side, we are going to let the committee do its work. Thank you.
Eagle Creek.
The former Attorney General gave shocking testimony on Wednesday about political interference by the Prime Minister. Her testimony was backed with specific names, dates, notes, and text messages. In her testimony, she said, the PM jumped in, stressing there is an election in Quebec, and that, quote, I am an MP in Quebec, the member for Papineau, end quote. The Prime Minister has lost the moral authority to govern and must resign. When will he?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Once again, we see misrepresentation, but the Justice Committee actually met in public, and Canadians are able to watch that testimony. There's been several witnesses appear, and Canadians should be watching. We know that the Justice Committee is going to continue sitting next week, and more witnesses will be appearing and answering those questions. But it was interesting because that member seems to observe the committee appearance, but doesn't seem to remember that the former Attorney General stated that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. She doesn't seem to remember that the former Attorney General stated that it was appropriate to discuss job impact. She doesn't seem to remember that the Attorney General said that she had made up her mind and that she chose not to proceed.
The Honourable Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Speaker, for 3 hours and 40 minutes, the former Attorney General gave shocking testimony revealing a sustained, coordinated, and inappropriate attempt by our Prime Minister to subvert justice. We now know.
Listen to the question.
I'm just waiting for the chatter to stop across the floor so that we can hear the question. I just want to make sure they're done. You're okay? Good. We'll proceed with the question. The Honourable Member for Caribou, Prince George.
Mr. Speaker, we now know that the Clerk of the Privy Council told the former Attorney General that the Prime Minister was going to get his way one way or the other. She told us that Principal Secretary Jerry Butts said there's no solution here that doesn't involve some form of interference. The Prime Minister has lost the moral authority to govern our great country. He must resign. When will he?
Government House Leader.
I have confidence in our institutions. I have confidence in the work that committees do. We have confidence in the independence of the judicial system. We have confidence in offices of Parliament. The Justice Committee is looking at this matter. The Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is looking at this matter. We have confidence that they will do that work. But it's important to note that the Conservatives are picking and choosing what they represent because they tend to misrepresent. The former Attorney General stated that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. She stated that it was appropriate to discuss job impact. She stated that she had made up her mind. At the end, it was the former Attorney General that made her decision not to proceed. The law was...
Member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, Edmonton's Mayor Don Iveson is asking for $1.2 billion over 5 years for 5,000 new affordable housing units to begin to fill the need. Our city's nonprofit housing provider working group says over 48,000 households are in need. More than 22,000 of those spend more than half of their gross income on housing, putting them at risk of paying for their home or other essentials. Many of these projects are shovel-ready, with land secured and buildings designed. All that's missing is for this government to release the federal dollars now. Will they?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Children, Families and Social Development.
Yes, have been released now. In fact, the Co-Investment Fund is a fund that has been set up to finance projects specifically put forward by municipalities, and we're engaged with municipalities from coast to coast to coast to make sure their housing needs are met. To date, close to 15,000 new units have been built. To date, close to 150,000 new units have been repaired. To date, close to 800,000 Canadian households have received subsidies under the new National Housing Strategy. The strategy is active. It's taking applications as we speak. It's funding cities and municipal programs right across the country. I was in Burnaby announcing projects. I've been in Woodstock announcing projects. I've been in Barrie announcing projects. I've been in virtually every province, and the minister has been working twice as hard.
Député de Trois-Rivières.
Monsieur le Président. The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières, Mr. Speaker. 93 workers at the Montreal Airport Authority learned that they were going to be fired. Liberals claim that they protect good jobs, but the minister on this file didn't do a thing. Last year, 8 of the most senior executives of the Montreal Airport Authority shared $1 million in bonuses. At the same time, the safety of air travelers has been outsourced on the cheap. Mr. Speaker, what is the Minister of Transport doing to protect these jobs? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Airports are to our economy, and we take safety at our airports incredibly seriously. Canadians can rest assured that we have one of the safest air transport systems in the world, Mr. Speaker. That member knows that the governance of airports is independent, and they operate quite well, including at the airports that he mentioned.
For Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, it's no secret that I'm a big fan of the Canada Summer Jobs Program. In my riding of Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge, this program has provided many young people in my community with their first real job. While the previous government put CSJ on the chopping block and youth unemployment skyrocketed, my team has worked hard with our local employers to more than double the number of CSJ jobs in my riding, something that had a meaningful impact in my community. Can the minister update us on the number of jobs this government has created nationally for young Canadians?
The Minister of Employment.
It's such a pleasure to work for the MP from Pitts Meadow, Maple Ridge on the Canada Summer Jobs Program, and his hard and tireless work on the program has made it a better program for young people across the country. You know, we committed to double this program in direct opposition to, as the member noted, the Conservatives' disregard, in fact, neglect of the program, which meant that young people didn't have the kind of opportunities they have today. I'm happy to announce that Canada Summer Jobs 2018 created over 70,000 high-quality jobs for students across this country. Not only did the Conservatives starve this program, they didn't care about the quality of the program. On this side, we know that our economy depends on young people having the skills and the opportunity to thrive. Thank you very much.
A member for Central Okanagan's Milkman Nicola.
Mr. Speaker, this week we heard jaw-dropping testimony from the former Attorney General about the political interference of the Prime Minister in a criminal trial. Her testimony was credible, detailed, and sincere. She said that the former Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister told her, and I quote, "There is no solution here that doesn't involve some interference." Wow. It is clear that the Prime Minister no longer has the moral authority to govern this great country. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister do what is necessary and resign?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
There's a committee process. The Justice Committee is looking into this matter. We on this side have confidence in the work of committees and the members that sit on them. We know that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is looking into this matter. We on this side have respect and confidence in our officers of Parliament. We know that there are 2 ongoing court cases. We on this side have confidence in the independence of the judicial system, Mr. Speaker. We think they should do their important work. The Conservatives will continue their politics of division. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General gave disturbing testimony about the political interference of the Prime Minister and others on an ongoing criminal trial. Unlike the Prime Minister, her testimony was backed up by credible evidence. She said, I quote, I spoke to the Finance Minister on this matter. I told him that engagements from his office to mine on SNC had to stop, that they were inappropriate. They did not stop.
Good point.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has lost the moral authority to govern our great country. He must resign. When will he?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Government House Leader.
That he does know that there are 2 court cases on this matter currently. We on this side respect the independence of the judicial system, and we think they should do their important work. Mr. Speaker, we on this side also respect the work of committees. The Justice Committee is actually working together. Members on both sides sit on the committee. They're asking witnesses to come. Witnesses are coming and responding. We know that next week, when most of us return to our constituencies, the Justice Committee will continue sitting and more witnesses will be appearing. Mr. Speaker, and it's important to also note that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is looking into this matter. We on this side have confidence in the work of officers of Parliament. We will respect them. They should.
The Honourable Member for Montmagny, Lille, Kamouraska, Rivière-du-Loup. Mr. Speaker, this week the former Attorney General testified that she was the victim of pressure by the Prime Minister. Even Ms. Sonia Lebel, the Quebec Attorney General, seems to agree. Gerald Butts, the Prime Minister's closest advisor and friend, said there was, quote, no solution that didn't involve interference. By facilitating and taking part in these activities, has the Prime Minister lost the moral authority to govern? When will he do as Gerald Butts did and resign? The Honourable House Leader. Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General said that the Prime Minister told her the decision was up to her. He felt it appropriate to talk about the impact of job loss, but it was her decision and she decided not to go forward. And I would say to the member across the way, he should respect her decision. Everything was followed the way it should have been at each stage. That is what we believe on this side of the House. The Conservatives do not seem to want to defend workers.
Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General gave shocking testimony about the political interference of the Prime Minister and his top cronies in an ongoing criminal trial. In a moment of blatant audacity, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff let the former AG and her staff know just what the Prime Minister thought of the rule of law, decreeing that the PMO doesn't, quote, want to debate legalities anymore, end quote. The Prime Minister has lost the moral authority to govern our great country. He must resign. When will he?
Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, in Canada, we have a rule of law on this side. We obviously respect it a lot more than on the other side because the Justice Committee is doing their work. Members from both sides sit on the committee. They're working together to have witnesses appear. Witnesses are appearing and they're responding to questions. Next week, Mr. Speaker, when we return to our constituencies, or most of us, members of the Justice Committee will continue to sit because they're actually having more witnesses appear so that more questions can be asked and witnesses can actually provide more answers so that Canadians can make decisions for themselves. And we respect the work of committees. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, we have offices of Parliament. The Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is also
for Kootenay, Columbia.
Mr. Speaker, this week marked 3 years since the Phoenix pay system fiasco was rolled out. And it's reported it will take 3 to 5 years to clear the backlog and potentially 10 years until the system is fixed. In the meantime, Parks Canada employees continue to have problems with the system as many work full-time in the warmer months and are on call in the winter. Their pay transactions vary, and they continue to encounter serious errors with pay and benefits. These timelines are unacceptable. Will the Liberals commit in the 2019 budget to invest in what is needed now to properly pay our workers?
Well, Minister of the Environment.
Speaker, and I want to thank the member opposite for his question. I know how much he cares about Parks employees. I do as well. I work every single week on Phoenix issues with Parks. We have made investments. I'm working also very hard for the minister responsible for procurement, responsible for Phoenix. We need to ensure that our employees are properly paid. I really value the great work that our Parks folks are doing, and we are working with them to fix this.
Honourable Member for Esquimalt, Saanich-Sooke.
Mr. Speaker, the Defence Committee just returned from visiting the Canadian troops who are supporting the UN mission in Mali. While there, we heard universal praise for the contribution that Canada is making by providing high-quality medevac services. However, we also heard concern about Canada's August 1st hard date for leaving, when our Romanian replacements won't arrive until October 15th. Will the government commit now to extending the Canadian mission in Mali so we won't leave a gap in critical medical evacuation services and put teachers, health workers, and humanitarian aid workers at risk when the UN mission is forced to cut back its operations?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know that my colleague, like other members of the committee, visited Mali. And I think they came back very impressed with what our people are doing. Now, where the Conservatives didn't act, we are acting. We're going to work with the United States, and our operational force is fully active and is ensuring a medical evac with the UN. And Mr. Speaker, we're very pleased that Romania will then take up its important role in Mali. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals' relentless pressure on the former Attorney General in the SNC-Lavalin affair is not only an embarrassment, but potentially criminal. In one of those interactions, the former Attorney General said that the Prime Minister jumped in, stressing there's an election in Quebec, and that, quote, I am an MP in Quebec, the member for Papineau, end quote. Later, she told the finance minister that engagements from his office to hers on the SNC-Lavalin affair had to stop. They didn't stop. The Prime Minister has lost the moral authority to govern Canada. He must resign. When will he resign?
Government House Leader.
Is actually looking into this matter, as is the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner. And the former Attorney General actually stated that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. She also stated that it was appropriate to discuss job impacts. She stated that she had made up her mind and that she made a decision not to proceed. We know that the law was followed at every step of the way. I find it fascinating that that member comes from the region that I also represent. And in our region, we've had layoffs and we've had people lose their jobs. And this member, rather than actually respect the work of committees and the officer of Parliament, and is focused on partisan politics rather than jobs in our communities, because he knows that Canadians are hurting. Those are the people that I will be fighting for, and those are the people that this government will fight for. Shame.
Member for North Okanagan, Shuswap.
Despicable.
Testimony the former Attorney General gave about the political interference of the Prime Minister in an ongoing criminal trial was nothing short of shocking.
Hear, hear.
She said, on January 7th, I received a call from the PM and was informed I was being shuffled. I will say that I stated I believed it was because of the SNC matter. Her testimony was backed up by credible evidence.
That's right.
Clearly, this Prime Minister has lost his moral authority to govern this great country. He must resign. When will he do so?
Principal Government House Leader.
In case it hasn't been noted, is that we have a committee process. The Justice Committee is actually looking into this matter. There's members of Parliament from both sides that sit on the Justice Committee. They have asked for witnesses to appear. Witnesses are appearing. Next week, when most of us return to our constituencies, members of the Justice Committee will continue to sit as they are having more witnesses appear so that they can continue looking into this matter. We also know that the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner is looking into this matter. We have confidence in the work that that office will do. We also know that there's two ongoing court cases. We on this side, we have respect for the independence of the judicial system, Mr. Speaker. We think that the matter is being looked at.
Honourable Member for Perth Wellington.
Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General gave extraordinary testimony about the political interference by the Prime Minister in an ongoing criminal trial. Her testimony was backed up by credible evidence, names, texts, and documentation. She said, "I experienced a consistent and sustained effort by many people within the government to seek to interfere politically in the exercise of prosecutorial discretion. The Prime Minister has lost the moral authority to govern and must resign. When will he?"
Government House Leader.
Because since the government, under the leadership of this Prime Minister, increased resources to committees and actually is permitting them to be able to do their important work, they actually are working really well. We know that they're independent from this place, they're masters of their own domain. And what's been happening is that members of Parliament from both sides that sit on committees are actually working together to move forward on matters so that we can serve the very people that sent us here. The Justice Committee actually has been working well together and calling on witnesses. Next week, when we return to our constituencies, the members of the Justice Committee will continue sitting and hearing from more witnesses so that they can continue looking at this matter. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ottawa South.
Mr. Speaker, as a father of 2 daughters and 2 sons, I strongly encouraged all of my kids to get involved in sports. Yes. A common theme that is often discussed right around the country among parents is equality in sport. Can the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Science and Sport please tell this House what important steps she is taking to improve gender equity and safety in sport?
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Science and Sports.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague from Ottawa South for their excellent question. Our government is committed to creating an environment where women and girls can engage in sport at all ages and levels and feel safe while doing so. That's why last week we announced a new secretariat to develop, implement, and monitor a gender equity strategy. This builds on our investment of $30 million to achieve gender equality in sport by 2035 so that all women at all ages can engage and compete from the playground to the podium. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Sturgeon River Parkland.
Mr. Speaker, it's clear to me that these Liberals can't handle the truth. That's right. The former Attorney General gave shocking testimony about the political interference of the Prime Minister and his top officials in an ongoing criminal trial. Now, I believe the former Attorney General when she testified that the Prime Minister urged her to intervene, stressing that there is an election in Quebec and I'm an MP in Quebec, the MP for Papineau. Wow. The Prime Minister has failed to uphold the rule of law and he has lost the moral authority to govern. When will he resign? Hear, hear!
The Honourable Government House Leader.
So the former Attorney General was at the Justice Committee and she stated that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to make. The former Attorney General stated that it was appropriate for her to discuss job impacts. The former Attorney General stated on numerous occasions that she had made up her mind and she made the decision not to proceed. Mr. Speaker, we know that the law was followed every step of the way and we know that the job of any Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadians, Canadian workers, and the rule of law. That's what this Prime Minister does. What's clear is the Conservatives focus on partisan politics rather than focusing on Canadians. We won't take their advice. We're going to continue making sure that we have a plan that's working for Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard. Mr. Speaker, each of us in this House cherishes democracy. We also know that the best protection for our democracy is an engaged, informed public aware of cyber manipulation. Further, the government has recognized cyber expertise, the expertise it needs to deal with threats and defend its networks. The Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence, can he inform us of how the Canadian electoral process will be protected? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague, the member for Pierrefonds-Dollard, for his work on behalf of our democracy. Our democracy is important and we have to have a secure process. We are working with the minister responsible for democratic institutions in order to enhance our system and work to combat disinformation and cyber threats. You can continue Mr. Speaker, to count on our system.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has damaged Canada's credibility on the international stage. Yesterday, New York Times writer Brett Steffen tweeted, "Who knew that the Canadian PM may be more corrupt than Donald Trump?" He's talking about the abuse of power with our judicial system. 1 minute, the Prime Minister is lecturing China on the independence of our judicial system. The next minute, he is bullying the former Attorney General for SNC-Lavalin. Wow. There's only one way Canada's international reputation can be restored. The Prime Minister must go. That's right. When will he resign? And if he will not resign, when will this caucus do its job and remove him?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
I think it's important that we examine again the evidence that was received from the former Attorney General, who stated that the Prime Minister told her it was her decision to take, who said that the PMO staff told her they did not want to cross any lines, who stated that it was appropriate to discuss job impacts, who stated that nothing was unlawful and that she was never directed. But most importantly, and what she said is that, quote, "I do not want members of this committee or Canadians to think that the integrity of our institutions has somehow evaporated. The integrity of our justice system, the integrity of the Director of Public Prosecutions and prosecutors is intact."
Bravo. For Regina Louvan.
Mr. Speaker, this week Statistics Canada reported that Saskatchewan was the only province where payroll earnings fell in 2018. That drop was driven by lower construction earnings. The government was elected promising to restore a fair wages policy for federally funded construction projects. Will the government provide a fair wages policy for construction workers before the House rises this spring?
Honourable Minister of Employment.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question. As it stands, we are actually holding consultations right now on a fair wages policy for Canada. I've been working closely with labour leaders, others that are interested in a fair wages policy, and those that it would affect. I look forward to the results of the consultations and charting a path forward for Canada. Thank you.
The honourable member for Repentigny. On August 22nd, the bridge of the Quebec City Bridge, and I would invite you, Mr. Speaker, to come and look at the Quebec City Bridge. To look at it, you would think that the paint job is 100 years old as well. Stephen Harper promised to fix it in a year. The Prime Minister said he would deal with it in 6 months. Before the bridge rusts away, Ottawa is going to have to do something. Why is the government not painting the bridge? The Honourable Minister for Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. For the last 6 months, I've had intense talks with our partners in order to deal with the Quebec City Bridge. We'll always be there for Quebecers. We'll continue to invest in Quebec City. And the citizens of Quebec City who are watching us, they should know that we will need all partners at the negotiating table. The honourable member for Repentigny, we need more than discussions. We need a paint job. Yesterday, the Prime Minister seemed really proud that Canada is going to the moon. They're going to the moon, but they can't paint a bridge. And here we have a gem of engineering that is rusting away. Liberals or Conservatives, it seems the federal government is faster with its words than with a paintbrush. So my question, again, what is the government waiting for to keep its promise to the people of Quebec City and paint their bridge? The Minister. I'd like to thank my colleague for her enthusiasm. Maybe she wants to help paint the bridge. It is an important jewel. It's an important part of our heritage. We're going to continue working with the people of Quebec City. This is an important issue for us. I've talked to the mayor of Quebec City, and people in Quebec who are watching us know that it's not just the will to do this. We need our partners along with us as well. The honourable member for Mirabel. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've been talking about SNC-Lavalin without talking about the workers. It seems that the parties here want to play petty politics on their back. We in the Bloc Québécois our priority is the workers, our economy, and not partisan politics. What will the government do to save the jobs of these people? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, since the beginning, and Canadians watching us know, we have been there to defend workers, pensioners, and suppliers who have nothing to do with the problems of this company. Will continue standing up for workers Canada-wide and the workers of SNC-Lavalin, and this while respecting all the legislation and all the regulations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that's it for question period today.
Daily routine of business, tabling of documents. The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 32-2, I have the honour to table in both official languages the action plan to protect Wood Buffalo National Park World Heritage Site. Monsieur le Président, et en vertu du
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order 32-2, I have the honour to table in both official languages the action plan for the World Heritage Site in Wood Buffalo.
Okay, done. Introduction of government bills. Sorry. Mr. Goodale, seconded by Mr. Blair, moves that for leave to introduce a bill entitled "An Act to Provide No-Cost Expedited Record Suspension for Simple Possession of Cannabis." The motion is deemed adopted. Mr. Goodale, or sorry, where am I?
Mr. Goodale, seconded by Mr.
Oh, sorry, there's part missing here. Mr. Goodale, seconded by Mr. Blair, moves that the